Hi YouTube! My name's Abby, also known as Jiiri, and this is my very first YouTube video. Right now I'm showing you guys my sketchbook. I drew this thumbnail a while back, probably around like Halloween, because I was really into like the witchy vibe, which I usually am. And I just needed to draw something for Halloween, even though it's a little bit late now. Right now I've been doing a lot of environmental studies. So I'll have characters interacting with rooms or landscapes, things like that. I really love being able to create a character and then think about what could be in their favorite space. So for this witchy character, I used a lot of objects that I have in my room. Just because it's a little bit harder for me to think in somebody else's lifestyle mindset kind of thing on how they would organize or what they would kind of pile up into their rooms. So right now you can see that I'm using the Tombow calligraphy pen. It's really awesome. I absolutely love this pen so much. I usually will use Faber Castell because I really like how their ink dries quickly on the paper and it's usually consistent. But the brush pens for them are really long, and the Tombow calligraphy pens are used for writing, and so the brush nib is a lot shorter, which means I can have a better handle on it. So I actually got this at a fair somewhere and was able to start using it right away, and I was so excited that I got it. So you can see here that I'm focusing on the figure first. A lot of times what I'll do is, depending on what the focal point is, I'll either start on the character or I'll start on the focal point. And in this instance, she is the focal point, so I'm making sure that all of my lines are nice and clean and warble in and out of thick and thin. Whenever it comes down to creating my focal point, I like using the brush pen to be able to kind of just have thicker and thinner lines, kind of, I don't know, aesthetically pleasing, I guess, to be able to control the wave and movement of these particular lines, specifically in her hair and her eyes. I like how the brush pen, I can just use light amounts of pressure and vary the pressure to be able to get different line weights in the same line. It's really nice. So a lot of times what I'll do with these drawings before I start doing any final pieces is I'll go in with my sketchbook and just do a really detailed thumbnail. It's actually kind of ridiculous how detailed some of these thumbnails are because nobody gets to see it but me. But I really like having overall ideas not fully sketched out, but enough to where if I have to get back into this character's head, even if I'm never drawing them again, I want to know what their world is like. So sometimes in the evening, I'll sit down with my sketchbook and I'll be watching like a movie or a TV show, and something will spark my interest, and I'll immediately just get into either that character's head or make up a character that's similar to that personality, and I'll be able to sit there and come up with some thumbnails of things that I really think would be cool to draw. So right now you guys can see that I'm using a different pen. This is actually the Faber Castell S pen. It's very thin lines, which is what I use most often for the backgrounds, because it doesn't distract from the foreground or the focal point. Even if I'm shading or adding color later, line weight really helps to establish where your eye is supposed to move around. And if the line weight of the background detail was really distracting and really thick like the foreground detail, it just wouldn't work. So now I'm going on to watercolors. These watercolors are my absolute favorite watercolors on the planet because they have a really cool backstory to them. I was out west recently and I had forgotten my watercolors at home, and we were in the middle of Sedona, Arizona, which is absolutely gorgeous, by the way. And I went into this gallery and asked the store owner if she knew of anybody who sold art supplies. And she said that the only place that sold art supplies within a 250-mile radius was 3 minutes down the road. So we kind of lucked out. So we drove down there, and the guy literally only had one watercolor set. It was a really teeny tiny shop in the middle of nowhere. And so I got it, and I love it so much because the pigments are fantastic. I can mix them so well together, and it's just a great little traveling case. I really, really like using it. I also really like how the black in the set is, because a lot of watercolors, to me, the ones that I've used anyway, just don't get the opacity that I need because I build it up in a ton of layers. So right now you can see that I have a gray wash, and I go through and I establish all of my values, figuring out where all of my focal points are going, where everything else needs to be kind of faded out and grayed out and muddy. And it's just such a nice pigment to work with. The watercolors that I've had in the past have gotten kind of chunky, if that makes any sense. So it's really, really nice to be able to just block out all the colors really easily, or at least block out all the values. So here you can see that I'm kind of going through and adding slight gradients of various colors to the objects that need the color. I'm pretty picky when it comes to establishing the color palette. I don't plan it out beforehand, but I pick the 3 top colors that I'm trying to use the most of, and then base my color palette around those. So this one in particular is green and white and purple. And the purple I want to be the most saturated because, again, my figure is the focal point. So everything else that I'm painting here, if it has any hint of color, tends to be a little bit more washed out, and I mix a little bit of gray into them. So that way they don't contrast too much, but the pigment still pops. And I also don't pre-mix my color palettes. A lot of times what I'll do is, if you see me putting that green down in those plants, the green is actually about 3 or 4 different colors mixed with the gray I have in the watercolor set. Just so that I can get the right type of green that'll contrast really nicely with the purple without it being too overwhelming. And I go back through and I establish more shadows. Lots of layers. I'm actually going to be doing a second part to this video. My camera died, so I'm not able to finish it, and it got really cold because I had to do this outside because my lighting isn't here yet. But what I'm going to be doing is, towards the end of the video, it'll kind of just cut off, and it's more so that I just kind of want to add all of my detail at the end. A lot of these are washes. There's not a lot of detail, there's not a lot of color distinguishment at this point, or at least tone, anyway. So towards the end of the drawings, I usually add a lot more detail and final stuff. Right now it's just kind of adding the different colors and making sure that my lighting and my values and everything match up and work the way that they need to. Now for her skin tone, because a lot of my drawing here is purple and green and black based, I actually mixed purple in with the kind of like a beige color, and then I mixed it with a peach, so that way the purple hue would kind of show through it, but still make it feel like it could be real. It's pretty weird because I don't really think about mixing color because it's just, I've practiced with it so much that I just kind of, it's instinctual at this point. But if you guys are interested in color, I am actually planning on doing a video pretty soon. But check out James Gurney's book. It's a really, really, really good book. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorites. Now, when I'm going through and adding the contrast to the background, you can kind of see how I'm just adding mostly gray because I don't want it to stand out too much in comparison to the character and the things on the table. It just would get really distracting, and then if I added like wood grain or any texture or anything that's too conflicting with anything else, it would just make you zero in on that spot, and it's not really the point. So I just want to make sure that everything contrasts well enough to suggest that depth, but back off in case I get too much in there. And then I go through and I continue adding shadow and detail in the figure. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you'd like to, please subscribe to my channel, as well as follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Should have the next video up in just a few days, but otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.